There were 9 Nazgul, yet of the 9, only 2 of them were ever given unique identities. The rest of them are faceless, nameless, without personality, wholly enslaved to Sauron. Yet that was not always so. They were once men, kings, warriors, and sorcerers of old. So in this video, we're going to be talking about who the Nazgul might have been and where they might have come from. Because we're all about the truth on this channel, mostly, I want to start this video with a disclaimer. If you've researched the Nazgul in depth, there's a good chance you won't learn anything new in this video because the amount of information about them is limited. As much as I wish I did, I don't have access to any secret notes that tell me who the Nazgul were. In fact, I wouldn't have made this video if it hadn't been requested so many times in the comment sections. So there's going to be a lot of informed speculation and guesswork in this video, but hopefully you'll walk away having learned something new. So let's talk about the Nazgul. Who could they have been, and where could they have come from? First, let's start with what we do know. The Nazgul were all men who existed between the years 1700 and 2251 of the Second Age. Their exact dates of birth are unknown. Depending on their origin, some could have been born as early as 1400 or 1500 of the Second Age, and alternatively, some could have been born as late as 2100. All we know for certain is that by 2251, the Nazgul had appeared in service to Sauron. Now, of the 9 Nazgul, we sort of know the identities of 2 of them. One is the infamous Witch King of Angmar, the greatest of Sauron's servants. This was obviously just a title though, and we don't know the Witch King's actual name. It probably wasn't Angmar, as Angmar means Iron Home, the name for a place, not a person. The other was his second in command, Khamul, also known as the Shadow of the East or the Black Easterling. It's also speculated that Gothmog, the Lieutenant of Morgul, was also a Nazgul, although there's nothing in the text to back it up. One other thing we know is that 3 of the Nazgul were Númenóreans. One of these was probably the Witch King, given the fact that the Witch King is described as taller than the others. And when Frodo confronts the Nazgul at the Ford of Bruinen, it's the Witch King and 2 other Nazgul who enter the water before the rest. While not confirmed, it seems like that these 3 are our Númenórean Nazgul. Also, just to bring light to another comment I got, and to answer it for everyone, yes, if the Witch King was a Númenórean, there's a good chance that he and Aragorn are distantly related. And that's it. That's all we know about the identities of the Nazgul. But it wouldn't be a very good Middle-earth Mysteries video if I just ended it there. So from this point, I'm going to be doing some speculating based on evidence within the text. No, I won't be able to provide exact identities, but I could point towards where they might have come from and why Sauron might have chosen them. When talking about who received the 9 Rings of Power, one must keep in mind what Sauron was trying to achieve. Originally, the 7 and the 9 were made for the elves, and whoever wore them could be dominated by whoever was wearing the one ring. But when Sauron's plan was uncovered, Sauron pivoted to giving the rings to dwarves and men. The dwarves received 7, men received 9. And what we see with the dwarves is that Sauron gave one each to the kings of the 7 dwarven clans. He clearly intended to dominate these kings and therefore bring their kingdoms under his sway, but this plan failed because the dwarves were naturally resistant. So it isn't illogical to assume that Sauron tried something similar with men, give them out to important individuals and bring their peoples and armies under his dominion. It's worth noting that unlike the dwarves, Sauron didn't necessarily give these rings out to kings. All we know is that they would become kings or great warriors or sorcerers. We also know this to be the case because Sauron gave 3 of the rings to Númenóreans. There was only 1 king of Númenor, and none of them became Nazgul because all of their deaths were recorded. Unless you're into Númenórean conspiracy theories. So who received these rings? Well, in the case of the 3 Númenórean Nazgul, it seems likely that they were given to either generals or governors. In the time frame I mentioned earlier, Númenor began to aggressively expand in Middle-earth, and Sauron felt that these dominions, especially in the south, were being threatened. One way he might have attempted to counter this was to see if he could bring these Númenóreans under his sway, and for them to rebel against their king by giving them a ring of power. Given the history of the Second Age is sparse, we don't know what happened next, and whether or not these governors or generals rebelled against Númenor and perhaps tried to carve out kingdoms for themselves. Whatever did happen, it seems Sauron's plan here didn't work in the long run, as although he earned himself 3 powerful servants, Númenor's hold over the coasts of Middle-earth lasted until its eventual destruction. Keeping this in mind, I think it's likely that Sauron might have recruited these other Nazgul from the same place, the south of Middle-earth, and I have two reasons for this. One is similar to what I was talking about just before. Númenórean expansion in the south seriously threatened Sauron's dominion there. From Sauron's perspective, handing out rings of power to important people in that region would bring them under his sway, which in turn meant they would be allies or subjects against the conflict with Númenor. My other reason is a bit of an iffy one, but bear with me, and that's got to do with Khamûl the Easterling. Khamûl has a unique identifier that's included in two of his names, that he's an Easterling from the East. To be fair, we're not sure whether this is his real name or whether it's used by his foes or not, but my line of reasoning is that considering Khamûl is uniquely identified as the Easterling, it might be that he's different to the other Nazgul, in this case, due to where he's from. He might be known uniquely as the Easterling because none of the others are from the East. Like I said, it's a bit iffy, but it's worth thinking about. So that's my conclusion here, based on my mountain of evidence obviously. The three Númenórean Nazgul, including the Witch King, were likely governors or generals that were tasked with subjugating Middle-earth, and Sauron gave them rings of power to attempt to get them to betray their kings. 5 of the other Nazgul may have been from the south of Middle-earth, likely Haradrim or related peoples, who were given rings of power to help stem the tide against the Númenórean expansion in the region. And finally, one was given to Khamûl the Easterling, and given the fact that he became the second of the Nazgul, he was probably a fairly exceptional individual during his time. To finish the video, I want to bring up some of the fanfiction takes on the Nazgul that you might not be aware of. One of the most well-known takes comes from MERP, Middle-earth Roleplaying, and although non-canon, you can find fairly extensive wikis on all 9 of the Nazgul. The Witch King is Murazor, actually the younger son of Tar-Kiryatan, and the 2 other Númenórean Nazgul are Akorahil and Ardunafel, who is actually a female Nazgul. None of the Nazgul were female. Other than Khamûl, there's also Dendra Dwar, Ji-Inder Dawndeath, Humarath of Deer, Ren the Unclean, and Uvatha the Horseman. Can't fault the names, to be honest. Another cool take is from Lord of the Rings Online, which actually evenly splits the origins of the Nazgul. There are 3 Númenórean Nazgul, the Black Blade of Lebanon, the Gloom of Nirn, and the Witch King. There are 3 Haradrim Nazgul, the High Sorcerer of Harad, the Grim Sauron, and the Forsaken Reaver. And finally, there's the 3 Easterling Nazgul, the Bane of Rune, the Woe of Khand, and the Cursed Rider. Note, they couldn't use Khamûl because the name only appears in the Unfinished Tales. And then there's a less cool take. You probably guessed it's Shadow of War, where we have Helm Hammerhand, who was born 3,000 years after the Nazgul appeared. We have Isildur, who somehow got revived and turned into a Nazgul. We have Suladan, who was clearly meant to be something like Ar-Pharazôn. And we have the Nazgul sisters, who come from Middle-earth China. Then, also our protagonist Talion replaces Isildur. Including the Witch King and Khamûl, that's 7 of the 9, and all I can say is that the other 2 got lucky. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it or at least found it interesting. I don't like doing too much speculation because I don't want to pass off my own ideas as canon, so I want to reiterate that my conclusion on the Nazgul is merely my belief, and there's no hard evidence to indicate that it's true. Your idea could be just as right as mine. Unless your idea is the same as Shadow of War's, then you're wrong. Cheers, farewell, and remember, no one cared about who I was until I put on the ring.